Hey everybody, Chris from 1052 Broker here again with you guys. This form that we're going to review at this time is going to be the touring agreement, which is going to be necessary to go into any property or cross any threshold with a buyer who is not under a buyer agency. The touring agreement will allow you access to the properties for purpose of touring, and you will need to convert those touring agreements into a buyer's agency when you do write that contract. You're going to start out with going to templates. We are going to go to the Sunflower Association of Realtors, and you're going to search for touring agreement. Once you have that pulled up, this document is the necessary document. We are going to use the CAR document. It has been written and blessed by attorneys. So we are going to use this a document. It will be required for all buyers going into properties. So it starts out, the touring agreement is made between the buyer and One Legacy Partners, LLC. It's the brokerage name. For real property located at the following location or addresses. Could be Topeka, could be a specific address, could be multiple addresses. It allows you to get into the door of the property that you are looking. The purpose of the agreement. The sole purpose of the agreement is for the broker to, 1, consult with buyer regarding specific properties, and 2, assist the buyer in locating and touring properties. These activities constitute the touring services. B, in connection with providing the touring services, the broker shall comply with all requirements of the Kansas Brokerage Relationships in Real Estate, BRETA, all of the duties and obligations set forth in Kansas Statute 58-30-113, and comply with any applicable federal, state, and local laws, rules, regulations, and ordinances. And C, the buyer and broker agree that they are entering into a non-exclusive relationship. This touring agreement is a transaction broker agreement. There are no agencies in place during the touring agreement. A buyer may have as many touring agreements out there as they do agents they have contacted or working with. A touring agreement is not an agency. It is not exclusive, and a buyer may have multiple touring agreements floating around at any one time. Please ensure that you convert those touring agreements to buyer's agencies just as soon as possible, or that buyer could sign with an agent that they have a touring agreement with in another place. So please make sure that we do follow and get those agencies signed just as soon as possible. To avoid using the touring agreement, you have the option of going straight to a buyer's agency, which I would highly recommend it. And at that point in time, the touring agreement is not necessary. You either have to have a touring agreement or a valid buyer's agency to cross any threshold of any property. The buyer's acknowledgement, number 2, buyer represents that the buyer has not signed an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement for the location currently in force with another broker. The duration of the agreement. The agreement is entered into blank day. This agreement shall expire in blank days at 11:59 on whatever date it is. Fee for touring services. The buyer agrees to compensate the broker for the touring services as follows. You can charge for those services. However, it is a part of our regular profession to show properties to buyers. So it is going to be specifically up to the individual agent should they choose to charge for those services. And that decision will be discussed with the buyer, and the compensation to the broker for those touring services, should they be included, must be paid through Keller Williams to the agent. There can be no direct compensation from the buyer to the designated agent. It must go through the brokerage. The broker shall not receive compensation for the touring services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to in the agreement with the buyer. For clarity, this shall not be construed to mean the parties can't enter into a subsequent agreement for compensation for additional services as set forth in 4C. Under this agreement, the broker will be acting as a transaction broker and shall not be an agent or advocate of the buyer. If the broker is going to provide the broker with broker services, provide the buyer with brokerage services beyond the touring services, the buyer and broker will enter into a separate agreement for such additional brokerage services. The fee or commission the parties agree to for those services are not set by law, are fully negotiable, and shall be documented in that agreement. Again, they're referring to the buyer's agency. Equal opportunity. Property shall be shown and made available to buyer without regard to race, color, religion, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, disability, familial status, national origin, and as may be required by other local, state, or federal anti-discrimination laws or regulations. Document is executed by the buyer on what day of what month in what year. Buyer is going to print their name and sign. Multiple buyers will sign and date as well. And then the brokerage will sign and date as well with you as the agent that is showing that property and those buyers. So the 14th day of August, 2024, Christopher A. Noack, signed Christopher A. Noack. David L. Grantham, signed David L. Grantham. Executed by the broker this 14th day of August, 2024. Keller Williams, One Legacy Partners, LLC. Your signature, the broker name, and the individual agent license number. It's a very simple form. Must be present before crossing any threshold to any property. The only time that a touring agreement is not required is if you are holding an open house and those buyers are coming in off the street. You will not have to have a touring agreement for those situations. If you have any questions, please feel free to call, ask any questions. We are going to have a Q&A regarding all the new forms and documents on Friday at 10 a.m. regarding these changes. If you have any questions, please give me a call.